The candles flickered their last breath across marble tabletops, as Elena Crawford moved between the shadows of La Serenata, balancing a tray of Barolo against her hip. Thursday nights brought the quiet wealthmen in tailored wool, women whose jewelry whispered rather than shouted. She had learned to read the room by sound. The clink of silverware meant satisfaction. Silence meant money changing hands beneath white linen. She wore the black uniform mandated by management, but at her wrist, just beneath the sleeve, she dabbed 3 drops of her mother's perfume. Violetta di Notte, Violette of the Night. The bottle was nearly empty now, 15 years after her mother's death, but Elena couldn't bring herself to stop. It smelled like memory-bitter iris root, soft jasmine, and something darker she couldn't name. Tonight felt different. The usual Thursday crowd had been cleared early, replaced by a single reservation, Table 7, the private alcove with frosted glass walls and a view of the canal. 6 men in dark suits had arrived without speaking to the hostess. They simply walked to their table as if they owned the space between the door and their destination. Elena's manager, Julia, had gripped her arm in the kitchen. Table 7. You take it. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't ask questions. Pour, smile, disappear. Who are they? People we don't ask about. Julia's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. Just do your job perfectly, Elena. Perfectly. Now Elena approached with the wine, her heart beat loud in her ears. The men barely glanced at her. They spoke in low Italian, not the musical Venetian dialect she'd grown up with, but something harder, more northern. She caught fragments. Shipment, Tuesday, the usual route. The man at the head of the table sat with his back to the window. He hadn't looked up once. His hands rested on the table, still and controlled, a thick silver ring on his right hand catching the candlelight. His suit was different from the others, not just expensive, but tailored with the kind of precision that spoke of old money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Elena moved to pour his wine first, as protocol demanded. She stepped close, tilted the bottle, and as the wine began its dark ribbon into the glass, she felt him go rigid. The conversation stopped. She froze, bottle still tilted, watching the wine rise toward the rim. Had she poured wrong? Splashed? Her mind raced through possible mistakes. Then he lifted his head. His eyes were steel gray, the kind of gray that belonged to winter seas and unforgiving metal. They didn't look at her face. They looked past her, through her, at something only he could see. His nostrils flared slightly, like an animal catching scent of something familiar in unfamiliar territory. Everyone, he said quietly, still not looking at her directly, out. The 5 other men stood immediately. No questions, no hesitation. The scrape of chairs against marble echoed like gunshots. Signor Valenti, one of them began. Now. His voice hadn't risen. It didn't need to. The word carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that came from years of never being questioned. Elena's hands trembled. The wine bottle rattled against the rim of the glass. She began to step back, but his hand shot out, not touching her, but raised in a gesture that meant stay. The men filed out. She heard Julia's voice in the main dining room, high and nervous, ushering other staff away. Then the heavy click of the restaurant's front door locking. They were alone. Dante Valenti, she knew his name now, had heard it spoken like a prayer or a curse, finally looked at her, really looked at her. His gaze moved from her face to her wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up slightly, exposing the pale skin where she'd applied the perfume. Where did you get that scent? His English was perfect, touched with a British precision that suggested expensive schools. Elena's throat had gone dry. It's just perfume. From a shop. What shop? Not a question. A command. It was my mother's. Elena's voice cracked. She bought it years ago. A small place in Cannareggio. Lucia's Perfumeria. I don't think it exists anymore. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite emotion, but a crack in the stone. Show me the bottle. I don't have it with me. Then you'll bring it tomorrow. He pulled a card from his jacket pocket, placed it on the table without looking away from her. 10 o'clock. This address. Elena glanced at the card. Palazzo Valenti. She knew the building everyone in Venice did. A Gothic fortress on the Grand Canal, windows like watchful eyes, gardens hidden behind walls topped with iron spikes. I have work tomorrow. No. He cut her off. You don't. Not here. Julia will be compensated for losing you. You work for me now. You can't just... He leaned forward, and she smelled his cologne cedar and smoke and something cold. Signorina, that scent you're wearing? It was created for one person, only one. A formula that was buried with her 25 years ago. His jaw tightened. The woman who wore it was murdered in her laboratory, surrounded by broken bottles and blood. The formula was lost. Every trace of it destroyed. He stood slowly, his height suddenly oppressive in the small space. So when I ask where you got it, I'm not asking about perfume. I'm asking about ghosts. And in my experience, ghosts don't appear without reason. He walked past her toward the door, then paused. 10 o'clock, Miss Crawford. Don't make me send a car. The door closed behind him with a sound like a crypt sealing shut. Elena stood alone in the empty restaurant, the wine bottle still in her hand, and realized that the trembling in her fingers had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the photograph she'd glimpsed. Just for a second, when he'd opened his jacket to retrieve the card, a photograph of a woman who looked exactly like her. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat at her tiny kitchen table in her apartment in Dorsoduro, staring at the bottle of Violetta di Notte. The glass was cloudy with age, the label handwritten in faded ink. For Margarita, with love L. Her mother, Margarita Crawford, had been an art restorer. She died when Elena was 12, a sudden aneurysm that took her in the middle of cataloging Renaissance paintings in a cold museum basement. There had been no warning, no time for final words or explanations. Just a phone call to Elena's school, then a funeral with 6 people in attendance. Her mother had never spoken about her own past. Elena knew she'd grown up in Venice, but the details were vague, deflected. "We'll talk about it when you're older," she'd always said. But older never came. Now Elena turned the bottle in her hands, watching the amber liquid catch the lamplight, and wondered what secrets her mother had kept locked in silence. At 9:30, she dressed carefully. Not the black uniform of a server, but a simple gray dress her mother had made her years ago, the stitching still perfect, the fabric soft with wear. She pinned her dark hair back and dabbed the perfume at her throat, her wrists, behind her ears. If he wanted to see the bottle, he would see everything. The water taxi he'd sent, not a car, because cars didn't work in Venice, was waiting at the nearest dock. The driver, an older man with a face like weathered leather, said nothing. He simply helped her aboard and began the journey through the canals. Venice in morning fog was a city of ghosts. Buildings emerged from mist like ships from clouds. The water was black glass, reflecting nothing. They passed under bridges where pigeons muttered and past palazzos where laundry hung like surrender flags in still air. Palazzo Valenti rose from the water like a fortress. 13th century Gothic, with Byzantine touches, narrow windows, stone balconies, walls the color of old blood. The dock was private, guarded by 2 men who nodded at the driver but watched Elena with flat, assessing eyes. A woman in a charcoal suit met her at the water gate. "Miss Crawford, I'm Bianca Rossini, Signore Valenti's executive assistant. Please follow me." They climbed stairs worn smooth by centuries of feet. The interior was exactly what Elena had imagined. Frescoed ceilings, marble floors, furniture that belonged in museums. But it was also surprisingly lived in. Books stacked on tables, a coffee cup left on a windowsill, a jacket thrown over a chair. Someone actually existed here, not just displayed wealth. Bianca led her to a dining room that overlooked the canal. A breakfast had been laid out: pastries, fruit, espresso in delicate cups, but Elena had no appetite. Dante Valenti stood at the window, watching the water traffic. He wore black trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with thin scars. He didn't turn when she entered. "Did you bring it?" he asked. Elena placed the bottle on the table. He turned then, and in daylight she could see him more clearly. Mid-40s, she guessed. A face that had been handsome once and still was, but hardened by years of something Elena couldn't name. Not cruelty exactly, but a kind of relentless control. He moved toward the table with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to waste no motion. He picked up the bottle, held it to the light, read the label. "Margarita," he said softly. Then, even softer, "She kept her name." "You knew my mother?" He set the bottle down carefully, as if it might shatter. "Sit down, Miss Crawford. We have a great deal to discuss." Elena sat because her legs had suddenly gone weak. Dante poured espresso for both of them, a strangely domestic gesture from a man who commanded silence with a single word. He sat across from her, cradling his cup, and for a long moment simply observed her with those winter eyes. Your mother, he began, was born Isabella Valentini, not Margarita Crawford. She changed her name when she fled Venice in 1999, pregnant with you, running from a family she'd betrayed and a man she'd refused to marry. Elena's hands clenched around her cup. She was my half-sister, Dante continued, his voice flat, factual. Same father, different mothers. She was brilliant, a chemist, a perfumer, an artist with scent. Our father owned a pharmaceutical company. The legitimate face of it anyway. Isabella was supposed to create fragrances for the cosmetics line, but she was more interested in the science, in the formulas that could change things, make people remember, make them forget. He pulled a leather folder from the sideboard, opened it to reveal yellowed newspaper clippings, photographs, official documents. In 1999, Isabella discovered something she wasn't supposed to know. Money moving through the company that didn't match the books. Shipments that went to places fragrances didn't go. She asked questions. And questions, in my family, are dangerous. He slid a photograph across to Elena. A woman in a laboratory coat, laughing at the camera, her dark hair pinned back exactly the way Elena wore hers. The resemblance was impossible to deny. Someone tried to kill her. She escaped, barely. Took nothing but a suitcase, a few bottles of her private formulas, and disappeared. Changed her name. Moved to London. Started over as an art restorer, something completely different, where no one would look for a chemist. Elena's vision blurred. You're lying. I'm not. He tapped another photograph. A crime scene, police tape, broken glass scattered across laboratory tables. This was her workspace, 3 months after she fled. They set a fire to destroy any evidence, but investigators found traces of accelerant. It was ruled arson. No one was ever charged. Who did it? I don't know. For the first time, something like frustration crossed his face. I was 17. I wasn't part of the business yet. By the time I took over, the trail was cold. But I've spent 25 years trying to find out. He looked at the perfume bottle, and then you walk into my restaurant, wearing the one scent that only Isabella could make. The signature formula she never shared with anyone. Elena's hands were shaking. She never told me any of this. She was protecting you. If people knew who you were, whose blood you carried, you'd become leverage. A target. His expression hardened. You still are, now that you're here. Then why did you bring me here? Because someone already knows. He pulled out his phone, showed her a photograph Elena walking to work 2 nights ago, taken from across the canal with a telephoto lens. This was sent to me yesterday morning. No message, just the picture. A reminder that they're watching. That they know. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping backward. I need to leave. I need to. Sit down, Miss Crawford. You can't order me. I can protect you, or I can watch you die. His voice was ice. Those are your options. If you walk out that door, you'll be dead by sunset. Not because I'll have you killed, but because whoever sent me that photograph will. They've been waiting 25 years for Isabella's daughter to surface. Now you have. The only question is whether you die ignorant or whether you help me find out who killed your mother. Elena sank back into her chair, her mind racing. She died of an aneurysm. In London. I was there. I saw. You saw what you were meant to see. Dante's jaw tightened. Isabella was careful. She would have had contingencies, false identities, ways to disappear again if needed. The woman you knew as your mother might have been her, or she might have been someone paid to raise you while Isabella stayed hidden. I don't know. But I know the formula for Violetta di Notte requires a rare compound that was only available through one supplier in Europe, and that supplier stopped shipping 3 months ago. Someone bought their entire stock. Someone who wants to know what Isabella knew. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. So I'm offering you a job, Miss Crawford. Work for me. Stay here where I can keep you alive. Help me find the answers we both need. And in return, I'll give you something your mother never gave you. The truth. Elena looked at the photograph of Isabella of her mother laughing in a laboratory that would become her tomb. She thought of the quiet woman who'd raised her, who'd deflected questions with gentle smiles and promises of someday. She thought of the bottle of perfume she'd worn like a talisman, never knowing it was evidence. What kind of work? She asked quietly. Dante smiled for the first time. It didn't reach his eyes. The kind you were born for, he said. The room was in the oldest part of the palazzo, access through a door Elena would have mistaken for a closet. Dante unlocked it with an old iron key, the kind that belonged in fairy tales. Stone steps spiraled down into darkness. He flicked a switch and lights bloomed below. "Watch your step," he said. "These stairs are 600 years old. They've killed people younger than both of us." The space at the bottom was cold and dry, climate-controlled. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, holding hundreds of bottles, vials, and jars. The glass ranged from modern pharmaceutical to ancient apothecary, some with handwritten labels, others with nothing but numbers. "This," Dante said, his voice echoing slightly, "is Isabella's archive. Everything she created, every experiment, every formula. I've kept it sealed for 20 years. No one enters this room except me." Elena moved along the shelves, reading labels. Midnight Garden, Widow's Silk, Iron and Roses. Poetic names that suggested stories. She pulled down a small vial labeled Forgotten Summer. "Don't open that," Dante warned. "Not unless you want to spend the next hour weeping for no reason you can name." Elena set it down carefully. She made emotional formulas. She made weapons. He pulled down a larger bottle, dark amber glass. "This one causes instant, incapacitating nausea. This one," he indicated a clear vial, "creates a sense of profound trust. Makes people tell you things they'd never otherwise say. And this one," he lifted a bottle of pale pink liquid, "erases short-term memory. 15 minutes, gone completely." Elena stared at him. "That's not possible." "It shouldn't be." But Isabella didn't think like other chemists. She approached scent the way a composer approaches music. Layers, harmonies, notes that trigger specific neurological responses. She was a decade ahead of anyone else in the field. He set the bottles back with careful reverence. She was also, by most definitions, a criminal. These formulas violate about 40 international laws. Then why keep them? Because they're proof. He moved to a locked cabinet at the back of the room, opened it with a different key, and because somewhere in here is the answer. The cabinet held a different kind of collection. Documents, photographs, notebooks with chemical formulas scrawled in margins. Dante pulled out a leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Isabella's diary. She stopped keeping it 3 months before she fled. "The last entry is incomplete," she was interrupted, "but she left clues." He opened to a page marked with a ribbon. Elena leaned in to read the precise, elegant handwriting. "The compound arrived today. DS 471. They think I'm using it for the new fragrance line, but I've been running my own tests. Combined with the alkaloid extract from A, belladonna, and the right catalyst, it creates something I never thought possible. A scent that can access buried memory, not create false ones that's crude, unreliable, but unlock what's already there, hidden by trauma or time. I ran a trial today. Subject couldn't remember their childhood home. After 3 minutes of exposure, they described it in perfect detail. The wallpaper, the smell of their mother's cooking, the crack in the bedroom window. Then they cried for an hour. G asked what I was working on. I lied. Said it was just experiments for the winter collection. But he looked at me strangely. I think he suspects. I think... The entry ended there, mid-sentence. "Who's G?" Elena asked. "I don't know. She used initials for everyone in the diary. Could be anyone in the company, the family, the suppliers." Dante closed the journal. "But whoever G is, they're the reason she ran." Elena moved to another shelf, letting her fingers trail across bottle labels. One caught her eye. Formula number 17, VDN, Violetta di Notte. She pulled it down. The bottle was smaller than her mother's, more refined. The liquid inside was the same dark amber. She uncorked it carefully and inhaled. The scent hit her like a physical force. Not just the familiar notes of iris and jasmine, but underneath something darker, stranger, mushroom earth, funeral flowers, cold stone. And beneath that, so faint she almost missed it, copper, blood. "That's the original formula," Dante said from behind her. Elena hadn't heard him approach. She made 12 bottles. Gave one to your father, whoever he was. Kept one for herself. The other 10 were here. Now there are 9. Elena turned. "Someone stole one?" 3 months ago. Nothing else was taken. Just that single bottle." His face was grim. "Which means someone knows what it really is." "What do you mean, really is?" Dante took the bottle from her hands, held it up to the light. "Violetta di Notte isn't just a perfume. It's a key. Isabella embedded the formula for the memory compound inside it, not in the chemical structure, but in the sequence, the order you combine the ingredients. Someone who knows how to read it could reproduce DS 471. Elena's mouth went dry. You're saying my mother hid a formula inside a perfume formula? I'm saying she hid a weapon inside a love song. He placed the bottle back on the shelf. And someone's trying to find it. Elena thought of the photograph Dante had shown her herself, photographed secretly from across the canal. The person who sent you my picture. They know who I am. They know I have a bottle. Yes. And they think I can read the formula. Can you? Dante's eyes were sharp, assessing. Elena thought of her mother, teaching her to identify flowers by scent alone, teaching her to mix watercolors, to understand how pigments interacted. Never chemistry explicitly, but always the underlying principles. Combine elements in the right order, darling, and you create something new. Something that never existed before. I don't know, she said honestly. But I could try. Dante studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then that's exactly what we'll tell them you're doing. What? Whoever wants that formula is watching you, waiting to see what you do next. So we give them a story. Isabella's daughter returned to Venice, learning her mother's secrets, working in the family laboratory, getting closer to the truth. His expression was cold, calculating. We make you bait. Elena stepped back. You want to use me to draw them out. I want to keep you alive while we find out who killed your mother. Dante's voice softened slightly. But, yes, the best way to catch a predator is to give them prey they can't resist. And if they decide to kill me instead of waiting, then I'll be standing between you and the bullet. He said it simply, as if it were obvious. I've been searching for 25 years, Miss Crawford. I'm not going to lose the only lead I've ever had. Elena looked around the cold stone room, at the hundreds of bottles that represented her mother's secret life. A life of formulas and lies, of brilliance and fear. She thought of the quiet woman who'd raised her, who'd worked in museums restoring other people's art while hiding her own genius. How long? Elena asked. How long do I work here, pretending to decode something I might not even understand? Until they make a move. Could be days, could be months. Dante moved toward the stairs. Can you stay patient that long? Elena thought of 12 years living with questions, with a mother who deflected and a history that was blank. She thought of the photograph of Isabella laughing in a doomed laboratory, and the bottle of perfume she'd worn without knowing it was evidence. I've been patient my whole life, she said quietly. Dante paused at the bottom of the stairs, looking back at her. Your mother was brilliant, Miss Crawford. But she was also terrified. She spent 15 years running from her own shadow. I'm offering you something different. A chance to stop running, to stand still and let the shadows come to you. He started up the stairs, then stopped again. One more thing. While you're here, while you're under my protection, you follow my rules. You don't leave the palazzo without my permission. You don't contact anyone from your old life. You don't trust anyone except me and Bianca. Not the staff, not the guards, not the people who smile at you in hallways. In this house, everyone is suspect until I say otherwise. That sounds like prison, Elena said. It's survival. His voice was flat. Your mother knew the difference. I hope you will too. He disappeared up the stairs, leaving Elena alone in the archive, surrounded by bottles of secrets and the lingering scent of violets that smelled like blood. Marco Benedetti watched Palazzo Valenti from a cafe across the Grand Canal, a cappuccino cooling in his hands. His position gave him a clear view of the Watergate, the private dock, the narrow windows where light occasionally shifted behind ancient glass. He'd been watching for 3 days now, ever since Elena Crawford had entered and not emerged. His Europol case file on Dante Valenti was thick enough to break a table: money laundering, arms trafficking, connections to 3 murders that could never be proven. But in 6 years of investigation, Marco had never been able to make anything stick. Valenti was careful, smart, protected by layers of legitimate business and lawyers who treated law enforcement like an inconvenient weather system. But Elena Crawford might be the crack in the fortress. Marco pulled out his phone, scrolled through the background check he'd run. 27 years old. Born in London, raised by a single mother who died when Elena was 12. Bounced through foster care until she aged out at 18, then drifted waitress jobs, temp work, always moving. No criminal record, no political affiliations, no reason anyone would care about her. Except that 2 weeks ago, Someone had paid €5,000 for a high-resolution photograph of her walking to work. The request had been flagged by Marco's informant in the surveillance for hire underworld unusual because the client had insisted on a specific time and place, as if they knew exactly where she'd be and simply wanted proof. Then Valenti had cleared his restaurant, spoken to her alone, and brought her to his home. That didn't fit any pattern Marco had observed in 6 years. Valenti didn't bring random women to Palazzo Valenti. He didn't deviate from routine. He certainly didn't lock down an entire restaurant just to have a private conversation with a waitress. Marco's phone buzzed. Text from his supervisor. Any progress? He typed back. Possibly. Will advise. The truth was, he didn't know what he had. Just instinct. The same instinct that had led him to Europol in the first place, that had driven him through 5 years of undercover work in Naples, that had earned him the assignment to take down Dante Valenti. Across the canal, a water taxi pulled up to Valenti's dock. Bianca Rossini, Valenti's assistant, his right hand, possibly more, stepped out carrying a briefcase. She moved with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to waste no time, her eyes scanning the canal traffic automatically before she entered the palazzo. Marco finished his cappuccino and dropped a few euros on the table. He had 3 options. Wait and watch, try to make contact with Elena Crawford, or escalate to his supervisor and request full surveillance approval. The first was safest, the second was risky. The third would mean admitting he didn't have enough evidence yet to justify the resources. He chose the second. 2 weeks passed in the cold stone rooms of Palazzo Valenti. Elena learned the palazzo's rhythm staff arriving at 7, Dante's morning meetings in the 3rd-floor study, lunch served at 1, the evening quiet when most of the household left and only security remained. She spent her days in the fragrance archive, notebook open, trying to decode her mother's formulas. The work was meticulous, maddening. Isabella had used personal shorthand, symbols that might mean chemical compounds or might mean something else entirely. V, D, N was particularly opaque. The ingredient list was straightforward enough, but the instructions included phrases like add S when the moon is watching and 3 drops of memory before dawn. Any progress? Dante asked one afternoon, appearing in the doorway of the archive. Elena rubbed her eyes. I think S might be silver nitrate, but I don't know what moon is watching means. Time of day? Lunar phase? Or is she just being poetic? With Isabella, it could be all 3. He moved into the room, handed her an espresso. You've been down here 8 hours. Take a break. I thought you wanted this decoded. I want you alive to decode it. He pulled out a chair, sat backward on it. There's something tonight. A benefit gala at the Palazzo Ducale. I need to attend business, connections, appearances. You're coming with me. Elena looked down at her jeans and sweater. I don't have anything to wear to a gala. Bianca has already taken care of it. Dress, shoes, everything. The car leaves at 7. He stood. And Elena? It's a masked ball. You'll wear a costume, and so will everyone else. Don't trust anyone just because they smile at you. Half the people there would cut your throat for the right price. Why take me at all then? Because whoever's watching you needs to know you're not locked in a tower. You're active, moving in society, getting close to the truth. His expression was unreadable. And because I'm tired of lying to you. Elena frowned. What does that mean? But he was already walking away, his footsteps echoing up the stone stairs. At 6:30, Bianca arrived with a garment bag and a wooden box. Signor Valenti's instructions, she said simply. Do you need help dressing? Elena shook her head. Bianca left, closing the door with a quiet click. The dress was deep violet silk, cut to skim her body without being revealing. Simple, elegant, expensive. The shoes were black velvet, low-heeled, practical for walking on marble. And in the wooden box, a mask, white porcelain shaped like a dove's face, with silver filigree at the edges. Elena dressed slowly, her hands trembling slightly. When she looked in the mirror, she saw her mother, not the tired art restorer who'd worked too many hours in cold museums, but the woman in the photograph. The scientist, the artist, the one who'd fled in the night with nothing but secrets. She applied Violetta di Notte at her throat and wrists. If someone was watching for it, let them watch. The water taxi ride to the Palazzo Ducale was silent. Dante wore a black suit and a simple black mask that covered only his eyes, making him look more dangerous rather than disguised. He sat across from her, watching the water traffic, his mind clearly elsewhere. Who will be there tonight? Elena asked. Politicians, Diplomats, business owners. Some legitimate, some less so. The kind of people who attend galas because they need to be seen, not because they care about the cause. He glanced at her. Stay close to me. Don't accept drinks from anyone else. And if someone asks about your perfume, tell them it's a family recipe. Is that a lie? No. That's what makes it effective. The Palazzo Ducale rose from the water like a jewel box, every window blazing with light. Music drifted across the canal violin, cello, piano. Inside, the halls were filled with people in elaborate costumes. Venetian nobles, Renaissance saints, characters from Commedia dell'arte. Everyone masked, everyone performing. Dante guided her through the crowd with a hand at the small of her back. People parted for him instinctively, then closed again once he'd passed. Elena saw the calculation in their eyes. Who is she? Why is she with him? What does it mean? Dante! A man in a gold mask approached, arms spread. I heard you were avoiding society these days. I make exceptions, Antonio. Dante's voice was cordial but cool. This is Elena Crawford. She's consulting for my family's cosmetics division. Antonio's eyes, visible through the mask's eye holes, swept over Elena with interest. Consulting on what, exactly? Fragrance development. Elena surprised herself with how steady her voice was. Historical formulas. How fascinating. You must tell me more. He reached for her hand, brought it toward his face as if to kiss it, then paused. His nostrils flared slightly. That scent you're wearing. It's quite unusual. Family recipe, Elena said smoothly. My grandmother's. Italian family? English. The lie came easily. But she loved Venice. Spent summers here as a girl. Antonio released her hand, but his eyes remained sharp. I'd love to know the formula. I collect rare fragrances. I'm afraid it died with her. Elena smiled, though her heart was racing. Some secrets should stay buried. A shame. Antonio turned back to Dante. We should talk business. The shipment from Trieste. Not tonight. Dante cut him off. Tonight I'm simply here for the music. Antonio's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Enjoy your evening. As he walked away, Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That, Dante said quietly, was Antonio Marchese. He owns shipping companies, warehouses, a fleet of trucks. He also moves heroin up from Sicily and guns across to the Balkans. And he just confirmed that he recognized your perfume. How? The way he stopped mid-gesture. The slight dilation of his pupils. He knows what it is. Dante's hand tightened slightly on her back, which means he's either the one we're looking for, or he's working for them. Before Elena could respond, the music shifted. A waltz. Couples moved onto the floor, their costumes swirling in orchestrated chaos. Dance with me, Dante said. Not a request. He pulled her into the crowd, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers in the formal frame of a Viennese waltz. Elena had learned to dance in foster care, a well-meaning social worker's attempt at culture, but she'd never danced like this. Not with someone who moved with such controlled precision, who anticipated her steps before she knew she'd take them. He's watching, Dante murmured, his eyes scanning the room over her shoulder. Far corner. Don't look. Elena kept her eyes on Dante's chest, on the silver tie pin that glinted with each turn. What do? We let him watch. We give him exactly what he expects. Isabella's daughter, wearing Isabella's perfume, being courted by the man who controls half of Venice's criminal infrastructure. His voice dropped lower, and we wait for him to make a mistake. They turned again, and through the crowd, Elena caught a glimpse of Antonio Marchese. He stood perfectly still amid the movement, his gold mask reflecting candlelight, his attention fixed absolutely on her. Then she saw the other man. No mask, no costume. Standing by a side door, watching Dante with an expression of cold assessment. He met Elena's eyes for a fraction of a second, then disappeared into the shadows. Who was that? Elena whispered. I don't know. For the first time, she heard something like concern in Dante's voice. And that's what worries me. The waltz ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Dante kept Elena's hand in his as he led her to the periphery, away from the crowd, toward a balcony that overlooked the canal. Outside, the night was cool and damp. Venice stretched around them in darkness punctuated by lights, windows, boats, street lamps reflecting on black water. Listen to me carefully, Dante said, his voice low and urgent. Something's wrong. We're leaving. Now. But. Now. Elena. He pulled her back inside, moving swiftly through the crowd, not running that would draw attention but with purpose. Bianca appeared from somewhere, falling into step beside them. North exit, she said quietly. Taxis waiting. They emerged onto a narrow dock. The water taxi was already there, engine running. Dante practically pushed Elena aboard, then climbed in after her. Bianca took the helm, steering them into the canal with practiced ease. "What happened?" Elena demanded. Dante pulled out his phone, scrolled through messages, his face pale in the screen's glow. "Someone sent me a photograph. Taken 5 minutes ago. You and Antonio, talking. With a caption, 'She has what we need.'" He showed her the screen. The photo was perfectly framed, shot from somewhere in the ballroom's upper gallery, and the sender's number was blocked. "They're telling us they can reach you whenever they want," Dante said. "That masks and crowds mean nothing, that you're not safe anywhere." The boat moved through dark water, heading back toward Palazzo Valenti. Elena's hands were shaking. She realized, with sudden clarity, that her mother must have felt exactly this, the watching, the threat, the knowledge that she was prey. "Isabella run," Elena said quietly. "Why can't I?" Dante looked at her, his expression unreadable behind the mask he still wore. "Because they'll find you, just like they found her. And this time, I won't be there to slow them down." The boat pulled into Valenti's private dock. Guards appeared immediately, more than Elena had seen before. The palazzo's lights were on in every window, turning it into a beacon in the darkness. "Get inside," Dante ordered. "Stay in your room. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Bianca." "For how long?" "Until I figure out who that man was and what he wants." He helped her onto the dock, his hand steady on her elbow. "And Elena? From this moment on, don't wear that perfume outside this house. They've identified it. That means it's a target." Elena nodded, mute. Inside, in her locked room, she sat on the bed and stared at the bottle of Violetta di Notte on her dresser. The liquid caught the lamplight, turning it golden, almost holy. Her mother had carried this scent, had marked herself with it, knowing what it meant, knowing what it signaled to anyone who recognized it. Elena picked up the bottle, held it to the light, and saw what she'd missed before. Tiny scratches on the glass, so fine they were almost invisible. Not random, deliberate, a pattern. Numbers, a formula, a key, and she realized with sudden terrible certainty that everything Dante had told her was true.